Recording in progress. Welcome, everybody, to the organ system energetics class of this nutrition unit. Today, we will be talking about the excesses and deficiencies of 8 different organ systems. I think we're going through 8. And the signs and symptoms of what parts of our bodies look like. Well, signs and symptoms of our bodies when parts of them are out of balance. And it's really easy from a holistic aspect to be like, oh, it's all connected, and it is all connected. But like, how do you identify what are the parts that are off and how are they off and how do you balance them? And from an herbal perspective, it's not just this herb for this and that herb for this, and what are the actions that those herbs are taking in the body. And so I'm not going to go through like this herb for this. There's a handout that's associated with the material that I'm going to go over, but I won't be going through that. We're going to be going through the how, and so like I said before we started recording, that I have not presented this information before. As I go, I might kind of get like a brain cramp. And if you have questions as you go and you're like, hey, that's interesting, let me know, because I would like to know how it's landing and if this makes sense to you in the intuitive way that it does for me. And I say intuitive because this is really like an energetic level that we're going to get to. The last class was really scientific and it was a lot of just facts. And I am going to be going through like, here are the signs and symptoms of each thing, but it's not so much facts as it is like, let's kind of feel our way through this. So yeah, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen and then slideshow, current slide. Okay, you all can see that? Yeah, okay, great. So the credit here is due to Michael Moore from the Southwest School of Botanical Medicine. This is from his Principles and Practice of Constitutional Physiology for Herbalists. So we're coming at this from our individual constitutions and, like I said, our individual organ systems. So energetics. So why energetics? As a starting point, we're addressing the primary function or the physiology of the individual organ system instead of the structure or the anatomy. Why are we talking about the physiology and the way it works instead of the structure of how it works? Because our body is always in flux. And this idea of homeostasis, you've probably heard Kayla say, like, if you stop homeostasis, you die. And your body's always in this mutable alchemical process of changing constantly. And sometimes these little changes we don't notice until something's out of balance. And even then it's pulling on another system and we don't know how to address the root of it. Michael Moore says, in an energetic support of chronic imbalances, you want to strengthen the function of systems in order to avoid the impairment of the structure. So this means that if the physiology is off, eventually the structure will be off. And once the structure is off, more physiology will be off. And it's such a cascade of events that, it's really hard to address it until you're like, oh, it's my stomach. And then you start to work with the stomach, but it's really not just the stomach, it's the rest of the upper GI that's the issue. And you've already started messing with the stomach, and now that's going to change the lower GI. And, so this idea is to not try to judge the system involved in the main complaint. We are literally talking about working around the system. So if you have one complaint, like my example is just the stomach, you start to, oh, I have a weak stomach. Well, you start to energize the stomach. Well, you're missing out on perhaps the root issue, which may be something above the stomach in the digestive system. And because you're adjusting the stomach too much, you're going to throw everything else off. And as we're going to talk about, if you pull from one system's weakness, pulls the strength from another. And so this is the idea that I really want to get across today. So give the complaint organ fertile ground to heal before altering it too much is the idea. Excess. So The energetic excess, overfunctioning of an organ, usually because of hormones or neurological reasons or the structural reasons, like I was saying. Excess in one system is paid for deficiency in another system. So the simplest way to stimulate is mechanical. For example, vasodilation. More blood, more life, right? You want to increase the blood flow and the life force behind a weak part of the body. You're going to need to give it more blood. So what do? You vasodilate. Well, if the issue is that the vessels are weak, you start to do that to bring more blood without strengthening the vessels themselves. You're causing more structural damage. So stimulating one system through normal channels would decrease metabolism to other systems. That's really something to keep in mind. And this is still a concept I'm like really going over in my head, because like gentle, the body needs to be healed gently. I think so much. I mean, just I can't escape the loudness of our culture and our society and our forcing and our pushing and our more is better. And just in the way that I was trained in nutrition and medicine, before discovering herbalism, it's like that is subconscious, at least for me. And so this idea of gentle healing and not wanting to stimulate too much or decrease in too much, because it does affect the systems around it. So
Sarah, I think that also includes being the best.
Yeah.
Always constantly having to seek out what is the best, and we've learned this last few years that best is subjective.
Yeah, totally.
And so that's part of our culture too, and then we feel guilty if we don't get the best because we didn't research well enough or we didn't seek it out enough. So I think that falls in there too.
Good. I agree. Thank you for saying that. Because also balance is subjective too, right? Like in our own bodies, I don't know what's off until I start to feel my way through it and an experiment. Kayla's always saying, do the experiment. You do need to do the experiment, but with a pretty good felt sense of what it is that you're doing before, during, and after you do it. And that's something I've learned the hard way, and going along with being the best, like Kayla said. So to suppress excess function often entails some form of drug effect. So this, he's saying, which builds resistance and tolerance. So he's saying that sometimes this excessness is numbed with strong preparations like drugs, like he's saying. So the excess or the imbalance or the deficiency, again, it needs to be a gentle approach. Indirect sedation would often suppress the structure. Like hypertension, we do things that suppress the hypertension without ever addressing, well, why was there hypertension in the first place? It's not necessarily that the structure has just run amok. It's that everything is connected and something is causing the structure to run amok. And so without addressing, why is the hypertension there? We're going to treat it without addressing the root problem. And then again, by treating that issue without the issue that led to that issue, we are causing more issues. And we know this intuitively, I think. So deficiency, most weaknesses in organ systems is derived from necessary diverting of energy to other organs or functions, like I was saying. This may result in lifelong accommodations between inherited organ strengths and weaknesses. These are habits, frequently caused by habitual or learned stress or emergency responses in the nervous system and endocrine systems as a means of summoning, quote, a usable substitute for missing motivation, creativity, emotional health, passion, or psychic energy. Okay, and this slide for me, this is really, I'm about to rant. I put read rant because I wanted to remember to read this part from his book here. From the full handout, and I can feel my heart rate rising because I'm so passionate about this, because I've lived this, and I just want to take this moment to stand in the soapbox on the behalf of Michael Moore.
I wish you could have met him.
I know. I really,
I got to study with him. I was a very lucky woman.
Yeah, I'm jealous. That's partly why I'm like, no, I'm gonna study with these teachers because you miss your chance sometimes. So we all want these auto induction stress devices that now I'm just going to read a couple paragraphs, and you can just sit back and listen and tell me how this lands. And I only am passionate about this because I have lived it, and I have known that like this lived deficiency of like diverting energy from one part of your body into another, causing deficiencies within myself. For me, it was like related to a freezing trauma response, like that fight or flight. I'm a freezer, and just like identifying these patterns within myself. So anyway, I'm going to rant now. Someone's in the waiting room. 1 second. Okay. Okay. So this is what he says, regarding deficiency and these, auto-induction stress devices. We all use these auto-induction stress devices. It isn't always possible to control our lives, to always have the energy to do what needs doing, to always want to do what is necessary, and sometimes shit happens. Some of us, however, become too reliant on jumpstarting ourselves with emergency stress measures on the Rolodex of fears, frustrations, and angers that can be thumbed through to induce a knee-jerk twitch of adrenaline. Since the first symptom of metabolic imbalance is usually increased central nervous system irritability, some of us may prefer to stay a little sick or autotoxic, if only to push the stress button more easily. One of the most frustrating things for a therapist to deal with is the person who doesn't like being healthy or in better balance. It takes away the gristly irritability that gives them their edge. The ideal, of course, is to place a helping hand into the limbic system, hypothalamus, even the genetic code. The best balance for a person is of the person's making. Lacking that, we take the organs suppressed by stress and habit, stimulate them physiologically with herbs, and deflect the life energy from those functions that are chronically hyperactive. This isn't the same as endogenous balance. It is, after all, just another external manipulation. But it is a manipulation by inference, not by direct suppression. Use defines form. Use an organ or function or tissue, and it becomes stronger, better organized, and better fed. It grows more mitochondria, draws better blood, increases its capillary surface area, elaborates better neuropeptides, elbows out a larger place in the physiologic pecking order of the body colony, and it gets stronger. Stimulating the deficient upper intestinal tract with herbs will never be the same as having by nature a strong upper GI. But helping those depressed functions to strengthen will, in time, retain them to become stronger. It ain't the real thing, but it will do for starters. Okay. I love that. And I think I'm just going to leave that as it is, because that's not what we're about to talk about, but it is a really good foundation for like the response, the relationship really that we have with, well, what's out of balance and how do we choose to address it once we identify it. And really it's about identification anyway. It's about being able to identify, here's what I feel like is out of balance and here's what I'm going to do about it. So these are the organ systems that we're going to go over: GI tract, liver, kidneys, respiratory, cardiovascular, lymph, skin, muscular. And again, if you have any questions, please stop me. This is a lot of information, and since this is being recorded, you're welcome to go through it a second time, and you have my slides and all the notes and everything too.
Well, also it's online.
Okay.
So remember, because it's Michael's, Michael's stuff is online.
Yeah. And I put the handout that I'm taking this from is also in, I think I sent it to you with my PowerPoint as well. So yeah, okay. It is online for free. So I got that. So upper GI deficiency. Symptoms of an upper GI deficiency. This is your mouth, your esophagus, and your stomach. So dry mouth, history of gums and teeth problems. When you first wake up, you might have a coated tongue or bad breath. You don't often finish your meals, or you eat to calm down. So think of like that quivering stomach that's like calm when you put food in it. But then you can't finish much because you get nauseated because you have a quivering stomach. So the indigestion or sense of fullness after eating. So this is definitely trouble with evening meals because you have slow excretion in your stomach, and before bed, that's not so good. Stomach and mouth have slow excretions, erratic tone, and peristalsis. So that's slow and irritable esophageal movement. Poor evacuation of stomach means that food stays too long in the stomach. That creates a poor coordination of digestive juices from your pancreas, from your gallbladder excreting out bile. All the releases are a little off because your stomach isn't working as smoothly and cohesively as it can because it's not reacting as quickly as it could. So this extended retention of food in the stomach causes some fermentation. So things stay too long in the stomach, it starts to ferment and ultra digest. And so that you have smelly burps, you have that leads to the bad breath, especially when you wake up in the morning, problems with food sensitivities, or combinations. I felt like this was me for a while, and like I was so bad with combining food that shouldn't be combined, and that was definitely part of it. But like when I would combine food that I would think would be okay, it was not good. I just couldn't handle certain combinations very well. Heavy long-term alcohol use can induce deficiency symptoms of the upper GI. I think it can induce deficiency symptoms of all sorts of things. But cigarettes can stimulate upper GI function. And so what a lot of smokers do, people with upper GI deficiencies can instinctively pick up smoking and forget that their upper GI is weak until they quit smoking. So then they quit smoking and they realize, oh, these tissues are, I was going to say fucked, but like, so you don't realize it because you're using something to satiate something that needs to happen in the body. But when you quit one bad habit, you realize, oh, this damage, this was just blanketing some other issues. So upper GI excess. So moist mouth, over secreting of stomach in the presence of food, exaggerated rapid evacuation of bowels in the morning. And these people can seemingly eat anything. And I know some people like this. It's like they prefer food with high protein and fat because carbs just burn too fast. Carbs burn real fast in the stomach, and for these people, really, really fast. If there's nausea involved, sometimes that's in the morning before eating because their body wants food. It like the stomach wants to digest all the time. Or it's before a delayed meal, like they haven't eaten for a long part of the day and they really need the food because they have so much digestion and fire happening in that area of the body, in the stomach, that they need more and they start to get nauseated. So here's how I'm going to break this down. I said we're not going to talk about specific herbs, but we're going to talk about when you do choose herbs or diet related choices, we are talking about stimulating. And like we said, stimulating is often like a structural change. So by stimulating the upper GI, we're going to excite by reflex with bitter tonics before a meal to stimulate the mouth juices and gastric juices. And like I was saying that I had sort of like a upper GI deficiency I identified through studying this and through my own, body exploration. And I think this is why I was so drawn to bitters. I am so drawn to bitters and bitter herbs that it was stimulating my upper GI to the point where like I don't feel like I actually have to have bitters all that often anymore. I think I have changed my physiology to a degree that it has brought balance. So that's exciting. So also exciting membrane secretions or increasing blood supply to the mouth, stomach, and pancreas. And like I said before, and I'll say it again, more blood, more life force. When you are sending more blood to a certain area of your body, you're sending more, everything that your body needs to like get around in your body is sent via blood and other fluids that are moving around inside of you. So sending more blood is sending the things that it needs to stimulate and like heal that area of the body. It's also opening it up for that healing to come in. So to cool would be, so you notice like there's the stimulate is to bring up heat and movement, and to cool is to slow down and close. So to cool or slow down the upper GI, astringents, a local vasoconstrictor would be something to decrease inflammation and pull the tissues together in this part of the body. Think like black tea. black tea, I was on a big kick with black tea for a while, and I realized that it's not what I need, because it's causing too much astringency in my upper GI that, and astringents also kind of coat the mucosa with something as a protectant. But that's part of pulling the tissues back together, because there's over secretion, right? If the upper GI is too much, there's over secretion, you need to pull the tissues back in, rein them in, and coat that mucosa so it doesn't keep excreting. Herbs to cool is so also cooling. It's easy to overstimulate, so avoid using tonic herbs, like I was saying with the bitter herbs, because they'll cause a side effect of upper GI stimulus. And low dose rhubarb was actually something I came across for cooling the upper GI, because it has, in traditional Chinese medicine, it is an herb that drains downward. It has a downward effect. Burdock also has a downward effect. So like this, think if there's too much going on up here, if you think there's too much going on up here, think we're going to pull that energy from up here in the body downward. And so while rhubarb might not have a direct effect on the upper GI, it does pull that energy downward through the body. So that's one aspect that we're talking about here. And like I said, burdock does that too. Not that it's a purgative herb like rhubarb is, but it's grounding and it drains downward. Okay, so
burdock could be purgative if you drank enough.
Yes.
Or mildly purgative.
Thank goodness. I've experimented with that. Okay, so lower GI, of course, can be related to upper GI deficiency. So lower GI can be simple constipation, that's extended transit and travel time through your lower intestines. And that's your long-term tendency to overlook the defecation reflex. Simple constipation just means like you have to go to the bathroom, but you're on a really long road trip, so you hold it. And then after like an hour and a half or two, you don't have to go anymore. And then the next day you don't go at all. And then you kind of get worried. And it's like, it's just like a structural thing that happened, and it's not some greater cause. It's just something that happened. So, doing that for an extended, like doing that over and over again, can cause a lower GI deficiency though, because it slows, that pattern of slowing down the transit time becomes a pattern in the body. Another symptom of lower GI deficiency is fat malabsorption, with episodes of I think it's called stearia, which is just fat, the excretion of fat in the stools, which sounds absolutely terrifying. But if you don't have the lower GI movement that it can actually happen somewhat easily if like that lower GI isn't moving like it should, because like I was saying, it's related to upper GI deficiency, so that when your upper GI isn't digesting things the right way, those fat particles make it down to the lower GI too big. They aren't getting broken down. So you think logically like, oh, it's not getting broken down in the upper GI, so it makes it to the lower GI. The particles are just too big to be broken down. So less is picked up by the blood, more is taken to the liver, which thickens the portal blood, which is just the blood that takes the arterial blood that's heading toward the liver. So that blood gets thickened when the fat cells are too big, and that slows its passage into the liver. The liver becomes sluggish. It then doesn't secrete properly to the upper GI, and the system just continues. So these poorly emulsified and undigested fats, they pass raw into the cecum, which is the start of the ascending colon, which is the first thing that nutrients, they go out of the stomach into the small intestine. And if they make it still too big of particles into the colon, then you're ascending, then you just have things are too undigested too late in the game. And that's the big issue, because if things are too big too late in the game, you're not getting the broken down amino acids like we talked about last class. You're not getting those broken down amino acids. You're not getting those micronutrients that need to be broken down at that point. You're not getting them. And then that's when malnutrition starts, simply because things aren't digesting properly. So and then the bacteria becomes imbalanced, right? And so with the shift and the abnormal balance of flora, the whole area becomes inflamed, and selective absorption becomes impaired. So this is where we were talking about B12, some fat soluble vitamins, some of your other B vitamins are taken up there, and they're not being taken up because everything's off and everything's inflamed, and it becomes a cascade. And then that's when it gets really hard to identify, like, well, where's the imbalance? What's the root of it? And as tricky as I'm saying, like, this is, it's not impossible, but that's, oh, there you go. And then poor stimulation of colon function causes impaired drainage of portal blood. So then I said the liver becomes sluggish. So metabolites that don't make it to the liver then end up in general circulation. And like I said, it's this is the cycle of events that begins. So while the liver plays an important role in all GI deficiencies, the upper GI must first be improved to improve the lower GI deficiency. So does that make sense? Yeah.
So when dealing with, regardless of whether it's a lower GI deficiency or an upper GI deficiency, you basically are saying you have to start with the upper GI. Because if it's an upper GI deficiency, you're going to start there anyway, right?
Yeah, you're going to start there. And identifying if it's a deficiency or an excess. I mean, and I've thinking about digestion in terms of this, like, beginning, middle, end. I would start at the beginning. And then if you think, chew your food. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Start in the mouth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's actually crazy, that retreat I went on a couple weeks ago. It's like how many different people said, like, chewing your food is like such a simple game changer regarding health. And it's like, it really is. And I think that goes back to what Michael was saying in this rant that I read. So many health problems are habit related. I like to say now that you are what you repeatedly do. And if you repeatedly rush through meals and repeatedly are eating food and not habitating your body, or repeatedly eating semi-inflammatory foods on a pretty regular basis and not really super aware of it, and then you wonder why I have GI or digestive issues, like, none of those digestive issues and everything that I just went over GI wise matters until the chewing of the food is addressed.
And that we stop eating what we're allergic to.
Oh yeah. And forgetting that food allergies are real.
Food allergies are very real, and we love to consume our allergic responses. And then we want to go to the health food store, the practitioner, and say, tell me what I can do so I can continue to eat the foods I'm allergic to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the worst one. I'm the worst one in the world. So I'm not telling you to do things. I'm telling me to do something. All right. Because I think bread and Danish and cake and pie crusts are the most luscious things in the world, as long as they're made out of wheat. And I cannot have it. I have proven to myself once again, I cannot have it.
It's a pulsing too, it's like that concept was one that you introduced to me. Like, it's okay to break your own rules, but, like, know thyself. And if you want to come to it, you have to go off of it as well. And so, like, if you're gonna just let go, know when to hold on again.
No, I reproved that I actually am gluten intolerant. It is a true thing. And I have proved it to myself once again. So, I'll be religious here for about a year.
Right. Yeah. Got to get you.
If you have a gluten allergy, like, how would you know that it's causing you issues?
Well, I actually finally got diagnosed because gluten actually, your body will create antibodies against it. And so they can measure those antibodies in a blood test and determine if you are celiac, or you can be mildly gluten intolerant. But most of the time people will know, because if they're eating too many starched foods like breads and pastry and pasta and things of that sort, and they're having issues with diarrhea or with constipation, that pardon me, that lower GI problem, that's a pretty good sign. And foggy headedness comes in there, emotional instability comes in there. There's about 56 different items that are asked in questionnaires on lower GI. And you all are going to be getting a questionnaire from the third year so we can set up your consultations. And I'm supposed to get that out this weekend, so I'll be working on that to get that out to you. And you'll get a consult with them. And usually we can pretty much figure out if somebody is intolerant. I can't say for sure someone is celiac. That really needs to be a test. But intolerance is pretty easy to figure out. The problem is giving it up. If you think that you are intolerant, give it up for a week. Give it up for 10 days. The first time that I got talked into giving up gluten was quite a while back by Michael Moore and one other, and Bill from up at the university. They convinced me that I was gluten intolerant. So I went off of it for 6 weeks, and I felt so good. I didn't want to eat it for probably another 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then it crept back in because it's pervasive.
Yeah, feeling good when you cut something out, it's a pretty telltale sign.
Mm-hmm. And I don't always try to replace it. Like, people will say, what's the best gluten-free bread? And it's like, well, not having bread, because it's not bread.
Yeah.
It doesn't taste like bread. It doesn't feel like bread in your mouth. It doesn't act like bread. It's not bread. And the only place I found that can get anywhere close is Billy's Grocery. Down off of Linwood and Gillum, Billy's Grocery. They do a gluten-free line that I'd swear there was gluten in it, but it doesn't make me sick. Okay, sorry.
John Kenny, did you have a question? Saw you unmuted. Maybe not.
I was just going to say, I don't remember who asked that question about how you can tell, but in addition to what Kayla said, I'm allergic to wheat. I don't have any problems with gluten. So I can have gluten as long as it comes from the other sources like rye. But if I eat too much wheat, in addition to the lower GI problems, there's a huge amount of inflammation in my body. I can feel it in my hands. I can feel it in my shoulders. I can feel it in my knees and my hips. All my joints ache if I eat too much bread. So that's really what's kept me away from eating wheat, is because that's such an aversive feeling to feel that inflammation creep back into your body after you haven't had it for a while.
Yeah. The elimination diet is when anyone is looking to identify food sensitivities, the elimination diet is my go-to suggestion, because to start with, you kind of have to start with a little fast and just bring in one thing at a time and really go into yourself and stay disciplined with it. Because if you break it too early, it defeats the whole purpose. Okay, should we keep going?
Sure.
All right. So lower GI excess, as you can imagine, rapid transit of food through the GI tract. This is 20 hours or less. I feel like I take that with maybe a grain of salt. I think it's different for everybody. So with soft stools and heightened defecation reflex. So the whole process is quick. So as soon as you eat, you kind of feel like, oh, I gotta go. But I think that's kind of normal when you get your metabolism up anyway. but so not normally of constitutional importance since it's an acute condition and needs specific treatment, or it's a secondary effect in a stress imbalance. And it can definitely be a stress response as well. Food not staying in the system for very long can be stress related. And so can like all of the things that we were just talking about, the issues, those can be stress related too. So he says it's not of constitutional importance. So it's not like certain constitutions are going to struggle with this more than others, but it is something to be aware of. Oh, and here's the parts of the small intestine that we were talking about. I just like pictures. So I added these in here. And when I first saw this great picture on the right, I hadn't looked at the words yet. And I was like, wow, this GI system is like messed up. And I was like, oh, it's common pathologies. So this person has like every single pathology this picture does. So I circled the issues that can go wrong down there. And you might not have one, you might have one, you might have more than one. But these are things that can happen when there are imbalances. So there's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, polyps, Crohn's disease, cancer, bacterial infection, ulcerative colitis, diverticulitis, adhesions, all sorts of things. So that's just there for your viewing pleasure. And also for your viewing pleasure, poop. You really need to know what kind of bowel movements you're having and what it's saying about your body and your digestion. So this is called, I had a different picture that had the name of it. What's it called? I was going to say, what do you look up when you want to see this again? But you have this picture. It's called the something Bristol stool chart. That's what it is. So they're different.
Sarah, I think everybody here has Plop, the app, PLOP.
Oh, really? Great. Okay. Well, I don't need to go on my poop rant then.
So they can track their bowel movements. And
okay, good. Not that I was going to do the poop rant, but like just know your digestion and know like, hey, if this isn't looking normal, well, how do I need to change my diet? How do I need to change my stress response? What could possibly be out of balance and how do I address it? Know thyself. Okay, so lower GI herbs to stimulate. Do you have a deficiency? You need to increase the bile flow, increase the pancreatic, and okay, these secretions I don't know a lot about, but this is the alkaline secretions from the glands in the wall of your duodenum, which is right after the stomach. Yeah, so see this picture of the stomach right after the stomach is the duodenum that leans into the jejunum, which is the beginning of the small intestine. And then that empties into the ascending colon, which is the start of your large intestine. So in that little spot, you need to increase those flows if you want the lower GI to be stimulated specifically. And like I said, there are herbs for that, treatments for that, but it's just one piece of the bigger puzzle. For constipation, herbs to increase peristalsis by direct irritation, vasodilation, or parasympathetic stimulation. Parasympathetic stimulation, we're going to talk about that. We're almost there. It might be after this. So herbs to cool, so sedate the plexus nerves and the smooth muscle walls and suppress the parasympathetic excess. Which, yeah, now we're going to go into what is the parasympathetic nervous system? And I'm only going to touch on this because I think it's a big part of the picture. But your parasympathetic nervous system, this picture here, this shows what's going on in the body when the parasympathetic is activated and when the sympathetic is activated. So your pupils, I'm not going to go through all that, but like your heart increases when the sympathetic this is your fight or flight response. Your eyes get dilated because you need to take in more information. The liver increases, your digestive system increases activity, your adrenals spike up, there's contraction in your reproductive organs. And this is really useful. We have evolved with a sympathetic nervous system to survive. But when it's activated all the time, it's called living in your fight or flight, or living in living in a state that is just not sustainable. So when you need to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, it's actively taking yourself out of that fight or flight response and activating the nervous system that increases, that slows your heart rate, that constricts the bronchial tubules, which means that you're not wasting energy in the body, you're conserving energy in the body. And there are lots of ways to do this. The very first one on my list is spend time in nature. You all get that. It does like 90% of the work. Get a massage, touch, incredibly healing. Practice meditation, mindfulness, not multitasking. We think we can multitask, we cannot. Again, that's part of the sympathetic. It works, but for a limited time. Deep abdominal breathing from the diaphragm, just mindful breathing, repetitive prayer or mantra, focusing. And that could be like focusing on a word. It can be, I have a personal mantra that I come back to almost daily, that helps me come back into my body. It's one that I chose. I don't know how it happened, but it's one that's really helped me. And I did not think I was a mantra person. But when I found that one, I was like, oh, I get it now. So having your own sort of centering practice, playing with animals or children or other people. I mean, I think we really have, the past year and a half, it's co-regulatory beings, like being around other people, we co-regulate with each other. And without that, the aloneness causes the sympathetic to activate. I think simply because we evolved to like not want to be cast out of the tribe. And I think sometimes when you're alone with a trauma, like, well, especially when something just happens, and I use trauma not lightly, but like when something crazy happens, like you get in a car accident, if you were to go home and sit with it, you have the potential to retain and potentially be traumatized further because you're holding it in, as opposed to going and moving through what just happened and co-regulating with other people or other whatever it is. So the rest of the list is like movement, exercise, active rest, progressive relaxation, active rest, go figure. Go lay down with the intention of I'm going to rest, not sleep. Sleep is not rest. Rest is when you take intentional time to go sit with yourself and feel yourself calm down. That has been life-changing for me, to actually feel everything slow just with the intentional sitting. Capital R, rest. Doing something you enjoy is just really like underrated, like doing the things you have to do versus doing the things you want to do. Like keep that in mind as a balance in your life. And gently touch your lips. I love this one. There are a lot of nerve endings on your lips. And if you were to touch your lips just really, really softly, you sort of activate the parasympathetic just by like all the little things that are getting activated. So I like that one. I kind of got lost there touching my mouth. I'm like drooling. Yeah, touch your lips. Okay, and I do want to do this little practice if I am able to impart with you one little practice regarding this. It's the 60-second centering technique called ABC Mindfulness. And if you would with me, just for like 60 seconds, if you would like to, you do not have to participate, but if you would just close your eyes, if you would like to close your eyes, you do not have to. You can close your eyes, and the A, notice your breathing, first of all. The A is for awareness. So becoming aware of my body in the chair, in the room, what part of my body is touching, the weight of my body. Where am I coming in contact with the chair or the floor or the ground? Are my feet touching the ground? Can I become aware of my senses? What do I smell? What do I taste? What do I feel? And the B is for balance. In that awareness, can you balance your breathing? How even is your breathing? The balance between forward and backward. If you weren't to move your body, but notice the balance forward, if you were to bring your awareness forward, and then with your next breath, bring it backward. And then in your next breath, to the left or to the right or up or down. I call that 6 direction breathing, when you can focus your breathing in those directions, and then eventually all at the same time. And then the C is for core relaxation. So can you soften the muscles in your belly, in your stomach, in your womb, in your hips, in your chest? What does that do to your shoulders? Relax your tongue. Let your tongue hang loose in your mouth. Relax the jaw. And notice what else can relax in the body when the core of you begins to relax. C can also stand for connection. So these parts that we're talking about today, and all the parts that you can individually relax in the body, can you feel a sense of connectedness as one being, as one body? And I don't want to go too deep into it. So whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and open your eyes. And yeah, use that little ABC: awareness, balance, core relaxation, and then connection, to bring it back to like a sense of oneness. I have found to be amazing and pivotal. And I use that a lot daily for sure, especially when I'm driving. So.
Can I just share real quick?
Yes.
I had a weird experience during this because you said relax your womb, and I don't have a womb, obviously, but when you said that, I felt like this relaxation in my lower abdomen, pelvic area, and it just kind of caught me off guard that I was keeping kind of my pelvic muscles, even as a man, keeping my pelvic muscles tight. And when you said relax your womb, I was like, oh, I can do that. I can actually do that. And it was just kind of an empowering little moment for me.
Oh, awesome. That's so great. Thank you for sharing. Because I did use that word intentionally, because I actually Jim McDonald speaks to this about like how that part of all humans' bodies is there's a boldness to it in the pelvic region, and like men need that part loved too. And even if you don't have the same type of womb as me, that lower V in the body does hold so much tension. Well, our hip junction is there. And so like just all of that lower body tension. Yeah, I'm glad.
It's our seat of creativity, whether we're male or female. It's still that seat of creativity.
Great. Okay, so now we're going into liver. So moving away from GI, heading into liver. So liver deficiency. Yeah, and I guess I put all that nervous system stuff in there because like we talked about GI, and so much of that is related to the nervous system. So anyway, I guess that's why we're moving out of that. So on to liver. So liver deficiency, dry skin, dry mucosa, that's the inside skin. All that's dry, and that leads to tension, can lead to tension. Atopic allergies of the skin. Atopic, I like to define my terms if I learned them as I write them. Atopic denotes a form of allergy in which hypersensitivity reactions such as dermatitis or asthma may occur in a part of the body not in contact with the allergen. So we're talking about food sensitivities. Have you ever like eaten something and then you get a rash on your hand like immediately after you eat it, and it has nothing to, like it's not, you didn't touch it, but it's a separate reaction in the body, and especially like on the skin. And so skin, sinuses, bronchial mucosa, like your sinuses become really inflamed. General poor fat and protein metabolism, we talked about that and why that can happen, you know, with the the fat particles, we talked about that with the lower GI. Poor fat digestion can then lead to liver deficiency. Tendency for labile blood sugar, that's easily changed and altered. So like if your liver is deficient, your blood sugar can often like just kind of be all over the place because your liver isn't like consistently helping you out and balancing those blood sugar levels regarding digestion. So this can cause a sweet preference, so like a yin-y sweet foods preference over the yang proteins and fats. And so going back again to like if your digestive system isn't going really well, you want something that's going to digest really quick, like carbs and sugars. And you're gonna not really want the proteins and fats, which are longer lasting energy, because your body is digesting them slower than it should be. And so this then informs your taste and what your body is asking you to do, which might not necessarily be like the best thing for your body long term. So you have an overall catabolic leaning homeostasis. We talked about homeostasis is this constant balance of metabolism. Catabolism is the breakdown of tissues and the breakdown of foods. If you have a liver deficiency, you're kind of leaning towards this breakdown aspect of the body more than the building up, because the liver keeps you strong. Well, it keeps everything going. I think it's funny how, like, in our culture, we kind of think about as the heart as like the beating thing that keeps everything going. And like I said, more blood, more life force. It's true. But in like Eastern points of view, like traditional Chinese medicine, the liver is that thing. The liver is the thing that keeps everything, all the fluids especially going. And like, it's just so important to have a good liver. And it's so easy to have it be deficient because of all of the things that between diet and stress. So most people with blood sugar problems, allergies, and constipation are liver deficient, and that can be acquired later in life from viral hepatitis, heavy drinking, and extended contact with solvents. I'm like, that seems really random, but Michael Moore has enough experience to know, like, yeah, that's probably where it can come from. But heavy drinking, I think there are other things like that over longer periods of time. Light drinking can just cause that subtle deficiency. And that's my take on this, is like the subtle deficiency over a long period of time can also cause like deeper deficiencies over time too. So then liver excess. So moist, oily skin, you have fat and protein cravings, general anabolic excess. So in middle age leads to elevated cholesterol, hyperuricemia, and essential hypertension. Essential hypertension is high blood pressure, which secondary causes are not present. So if there's a disease state in the body that hypertension would be a side effect for, this is not that. This is when there's just general hypertension potentially from stress. And like we were talking about, a lot of the way we hold our body informs our body how to act. Use defines form. If we're using our body in a tense, hypertense way, the form will take on hypertension. And so that's the anabolic excess, the building up. Your body is ramped up to produce because you are demanding the production of the energy. And then that's what leads to, there's too much cholesterol, or there's too much the hyperuricemia. Hyperuricemia is your body makes too much uric acid, or your kidneys aren't processing enough of it. And so it's just the idea of too much. So that's liver excess. Rapid defense response with quick fever and quick sweating. Usual causes are adrenocortical stress with elevated testosterone and progesterone. So hormone imbalances may be related to thyroid stress. And this says that includes general tachycardia, which is the uneven heartbeat. So that can, you think about all the symptoms that I just described: uneven heartbeat, disrupted sleep patterns, all over the place, too much, excess. So if you have deficient liver, John Kinney, you have a question?
Yeah. So do you find that people who have I'm thinking of somebody in my life, so people who have general, like liver problems in general, tend to vacillate between excess and deficiency? Like somebody who might drink too much, or somebody who just has, like some type of trigger, they go into an excess state based on that, but then they kind of rebound into a deficient state. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like we were saying, I think the excess will pull energy from another source. And then when it's time to balance it out, that other source, other parts of the body, other systems need that energy back. And then you're left, let's say the liver is left in a more deficient state than it was before it became into excess. So I think that this idea of homeostasis is that we're always in flux, which means that if you're gonna go into an excess state, at least to me, it makes sense that has to crash, that has to come back down. And it is that extreme imbalance, especially in a pattern, that can cause further unbalance. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm. So increasing liver metabolism means exciting the liver enzyme production, increasing bile synthesis, and liver cleansing. This is a weird term to me, but the liver cleansing, because there are things that just generally support the liver, and there are certain things that help bile reproduce, even though most of the bile in your body is recycled. Things like vinegar can sort of help that, bringing more bile back into the system. Improving fat absorption into the lymph, which would take the fat load off of the blood that goes into the liver. Also increasing blood supply by dilating the hepatic artery. But again, if you think that, the liver deficiency is just going to be solved by bringing more blood into the liver, yes, true, unless the root cause of the liver deficiency is related to your GI. So yes, increase blood flow to the liver and focus on the root cause of why the liver is deficient in the first place. Herbs to cool. When you're thinking about cooling down an excess liver, we're talking about increasing blood buffering of nitrogen compounds with electrolytes. So remember last time we talked about the sodium and potassium pumps? That's what the Na+ and K+ sodium and potassium is. Making sure that you're getting your electrolytes. Maybe the liver is working too hard because it just simply doesn't have what it needs, or other parts of the body don't have what it needs. And so that's why it's working too hard. I just got to notice my internet connection's unstable. If I freeze, let me know somehow. Okay. Increase bile secretion without stimulating liver metabolism. So yeah, if you have low bile secretion, try to focus on that without stimulating all the other effects that the liver does. So like we were saying, focus on little changes. And for the diet, increasing protein and fat, and increase green and red crispy vegetables. So even if this person is not craving the protein and fat, start with light crunchy vegetables or something that is going to provide nutrients and that mouthfeel of like, I'm eating something carby and crunchy that isn't really protein and fat, even though that what the body needs is more protein and fat. And sometimes it does take a while to change what the body is craving. But yeah, really focusing on that. Oh, decrease protein and fat. Sorry, decrease protein and fat, because you're having too much. If it's like backwards. So if you need to cool down when there's excess, which means that person needs to decrease protein and fat. So increasing the vegetables because they need more of that feel, like I was saying, like that carby feel without too much carbs and without too much fat.
Hey, Sarah, I do have an herb here. This idea of increasing bile secretion without stimulating the liver might be kind of challenging for someone to figure out, because when we think of burdock, yes, that's going to increase bile, but it also stimulates the liver. Dandelion really stimulates the liver, and so I think of chamomile there. So I just wanted to bring it up to say there's a really bitter herb that doesn't really associate to liver function. It really is working on gallbladder function. And so it would help increase bile without stimulating the liver.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Yeah. I don't think of chamomile. That's true. I don't think of chamomile as like a liver, but it does move those, helps with the digestion that the liver would help with too. Yeah. Yeah.
And it does increase bile.
I have a question. So in one of our textbooks, the Modern Herbal Dispensary, they break the liver herbs up into, what did they say? Hold on. I think it was strengthening and protecting. So you think like the strengthening ones, we would equate that to a deficiency, and the protecting, we would equate that to excessive?
I'm going to have to look. I will look right now.
It's just, Kayla, it's just the way they have it in the index.
Well, and the thing of it is, this is what herbalists do. We all will create our own unique little language to make it ours instead of it belonging to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes what you will get with Sarah and I is, oh, here's what everybody says about it. And so let me look at specifically what Thomas is speaking of.
It's on page 357.
Thank you.
My gut reaction says, it says yes and no. Go figure.
Okay, that's kind of where I was at too.
Because how does he separate it? Protectants and what's the other one?
I didn't look at any of the herbs. I was just, as I was thinking through this and looking at it, I happened to have it here and I just flipped to the index. So in the index, he has chi constriction, and then he has cleansing, and then he has a liver formula that's just like a recipe. But then he has protection, and this is where it gets into the section about like individual herbs. Protection and strengthening.
Protection and strengthening.
So he's got like liver protection on these pages, liver strengthening on these pages.
Okay, I'm looking them up because
Okay.
that's going to be the way for me to be able to answer your question. Okay, so that's art. So the first one I looked up was artichoke, and that was under the protection, and that is cooling. Artichoke is cooling. And
Stimulating would be something like strengthening, but protection might be more, to me that sounds like more of like a tonic that would support the individual system, and not necessarily in relation to deficiencies in excess.
And see, he's on one list is a cooling and drying herb, and on the other list is a cooling and drying herb.
Right.
So we also do this too. We don't always follow our own system.
Yeah.
And
they don't always fit, with each other anyway. I mean, I like this correlation because it does help weave together the web, because I love that book and I love Thomas Easley and his take on all that. But I think it works well together, but not necessarily as an overlay.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then milk thistle is next on the list for protection, and it's cool and moistening versus cool and drying. So I think that he's looking at aspects simply beyond their energetic, John Kenny, is what I would say.
Yeah, because milk thistle is really powerful. And like as a protectant, I can kind of feel like, when you do milk thistle for the liver, it is kind of like this like fuck off energy that milk thistle has, because it's so like it will protect the liver. Like I think if the liver's in a dire state, that was always one that the health food store I worked at, we would tell people would come in for liver support, and the first question was, do you drink? And if anyone said yes, I drink, even occasionally, they would say people would recommend milk thistle. Because
next strengthening one is burdock. So I see where he's going with the methodology, But I don't think it directly relates to anything that Sarah's talking about or that Michael Moore was pointing to. And some of it could be old style of looking at Western herbs and Chinese medicine, and new style of doing that. And don't ever expect all of us to agree.
It's a good question. Okay, so moving into kidneys. Kidney deficiency. So this would be frequent, dilute, pale urination, often at night, flushing and headaches, thirst and short-term water retention, tendency for low blood pressure. Things aren't moving very well. And so at night when things really do relax, I mean, that's why like often at night is because, things finally get to the point that they relax and it's just like they kind of break, right? Orthostatic hypertension is common. I had to look this one up too. So this is when you stand, like when you go from sitting to standing and you stand up too fast and the blood stays around your solar plexus, gradually surging through your brain. And then that's what causes like the blood pounding in your ears when you stand up. And so if your kidneys and your kidneys being the water balance, knobs in your body, if the kidneys and the arteries fail to compensate fast enough, you faint. And this isn't, I've never known anyone to faint from standing up, but I definitely have had this experience of like standing up and the blood pounding in my ears and I get dizzy. So that can happen. Tendency to react poorly to sudden temperature changes or humidity or barometric pressure. So the kidneys, like I said, are like knobs for the water balance in your body. It's those fluids and your capillaries being able to shift and adjust and move in the homeostasis that we were talking about in the kidney metabolism that helps you adjust to things like temperature and pressure. And that's why when those things aren't working, the pressure changes in the body just from standing up can be too much. So common stresses to fluid and homeostasis, osmosis homeostasis like PMS, or high altitudes, third trimester when water balance is really off, steroid drugs, high salt intake, which affects your electrolyte imbalance, like we were talking about, which affects your water balance, all produce exaggerated symptoms in a kidney deficient person. So also urine easily becomes more neutral or alkaline, even with small diet shifts, because it's like, so when you're thinking kidney deficiency is not functioning optimally, right? And so it's like that quivering. I keep using that word, and I think it's just because like there's a weakness, and so it like shakes, and so it's already shaking, and so any kind of shove or adjustment throws it out of balance. And homeostasis shouldn't react like that. Your body shouldn't react like that. You should be able to like take changes and hold it well, and your body should be able to adjust slowly without you fainting, right? Or without like sudden changes really causing dramatic side effects in you. So then kidney excess. So that's sodium and water retention, essential hypertension, the hypertension that isn't related to something else. So this can happen from increased blood volume as well. And then concentrated acidic urine, warm, moist skin, and the orthostatic hypertension again, which was the form of low blood pressure that happens when standing up or lying down. And I think that that's really interesting. That can happen both in the deficiency and the excess in this case, because it just means that things aren't in balance. And so the massive shifts that your body has to take when things are that out of balance can cause those effects. So like we were just saying, like it's not always one way or this herb for this thing. The out of balanceness causes more out of balanceness. And so those effects aren't pretty. So when you need to stimulate the kidneys, you either need to strengthen or stimulate the kidney nephrons, which are the main like filtering part in the anatomy of the kidney. Improve renal blood supply that's diminished and adrenaline stress. So like we were talking about that rant that I said at the beginning, that most people, the first reaction to stress is that central nervous system activation. That like just slow desire for adrenaline stress can diminish blood supply in the kidneys as well. So like that filtering part of your body that's helping you balance and stay balanced. And if you think about it from like the metaphysical standpoint, well, this is the water balance, this is the fluid balance. And so your watery self is being shut off when you're stressed. So if you're stressed, the waters become something like fixed or drained. And when you want to bring more balance back into that system, things start moving again, which means the stress, you have to take away the stress in order for those waters to balance properly in the body. Hormonal stimulation, a lot, some of this can be hormonal related, but again, that's stress related. With kidney deficiency and increased volume of urine, there is less surplus for the skin, intestine, and lungs. So that's something to think about. If you're taking away water from the body and you're excreting more water than you should be, things are going to become drier. Other parts of the body are going to become drier. So if your skin, intestine, and lungs become drier, dryness creates tension, or it can create tension. So if your skin or if your intestines get dry, they're going to get tense. And then that tension causes friction, and that friction causes inflammation. And that inflammation causes malabsorption, and that malabsorption causes structural issues. And then the whole system starts over and over and over. So yeah. Herbs to cool, or when you're thinking about cooling the kidneys. So dilate the renal arteries, right? Let them open so that more blood flow can cool them down. Relax the limbic system and the hypothalamus. This is going back to parasympathetic nervous system activation. Do all those things on the list that I said. Do your ABC centering. Decrease reabsorption of sodium. Therefore, increasing the volume of urine. Increasing the volume of urine. Water follows sodium. Yeah, instead of losing it all. But for your diet, this is the tip, diet related, to decrease protein in the diet and increase foods high in electrolytes and minerals. I feel like that is just going to be increasing foods, increasing electrolytes and minerals. It's going to be like a tip for all balancing, like to calm down excess, but just bringing in more mineral content into the diet so that your body can have what it needs, so that when you're ready, remember what I said at the beginning was like, give that part of your body fertile ground for healing. Give it everything that you can to come back into balance in its own time. And part of that is proper nourishment.
When in doubt, use nettles.
Yes. And it's interesting, nettles would help the kidneys both in excess and deficiency, because herbs are crazy. Plants are crazy. Like, how does that work? I don't know. It's magic, but also nettles. When in doubt, use nettles. I think also it's the mineral content, right? You're giving your body what it needs.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go back to the kidney deficiency? Yeah. So it says frequent, dilute, and pale urination. Is it the combination, like the frequency and the dilution of it? Because, and the reason I ask is, back when I used to teach, I always used to tell my kids, especially, in the end of the school year, beginning of school year when it was hot, hey, your pee should be clear. Your pee should be clear. If you're drinking enough water, your pee will be clear. If you're, or light yellow, but if it's dark, please drink more water. And that was kind of like, that's how you know if you're getting enough water. So I'm trying to break through kind of an old thought pattern with this new information.
I think that that's good advice. I think that generally that's good advice, that if you know that you're not drinking enough water and your urine is pale, then you're not excreting what should be being excreted. And so, yeah, if you're drinking enough water, your pee should be pale or paler than it would be if you were dehydrated. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a difference between what you would do during the daytime and what would happen to you at night. If you're out and active on a hot day like today, and you're drinking enough, you do want to strive for that pale urination. But think about what it would look like in the middle of the night after you've had another meal, you've had other things consumed, liquids consumed. You would expect your urine in the middle of the night to have some color.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Respiratory. So this one's a little tricky for me because respiratory, it's not a super clear line. And I think with some of these not so obvious systems like digestion, I feel it, I see it, I am it. But respiratory just happens. It's part of the autonomic nervous system, and which means it just happens without me. I guess that's digestion too. But anyway, we'll go through this. So respiratory deficiency, frequent lung problems, when things aren't functioning as much as they should be. And so you're just going to have more lung problems than the average person. Shortness of breath, dry membranes with poor expectoration. So remember what I was just saying with dryness sometimes causes tension. And expectorants, about expectorants with herbs that cause like the shaking up and the expelling. That's not going to happen when the membranes are dry and tense. So even if you think an expectorant is going to help with whatever's going on, if the membranes are dry and the lungs aren't even functioning properly, you don't have the mucosa for that herb to do its job, and it's not going to shake itself out of the lungs because they are deficient. The lungs are deficient in their metabolism. So frequent yawning with noticeably labile respiration. So that's the sometimes shallow, sometimes fast, other sighs, deep sighs. I like that he says deep sighs that reflect emotions, because there's something about like never having your breath and never being able to process the breath. Breath is life, life is breath. And then, not having a clean and clear flow to that breath, that when you do catch your breath, it can cause an emotional reaction because you realize, oh, I'm not breathing. And like, what a sad thought that you're not breathing. Because if you have deficiency in your respiratory system, that's a really easy symptom that once you're aware of it, it's like, okay, maybe there needs to be more balance here. Often smoked tobacco is an instinctive response. So that's a typo too. So it becomes respiratory stimulation, but you quit after many years because it's now become too irritating to the weak tissues that are even weaker now. Like I mentioned that with upper GI, the lungs are the same way. The nicotine causes a tension. So your lungs are deficient, right? And the nicotine causes a tension that really helps bring your lungs back to life. It's actually calming. It actually helps you catch your breath because it's giving the structural lungs something to hold on to, literally something to hold it up. Over time, it does weaken the tissues. So then you quit smoking and the tissues are even weaker. And now there's even more issues that you didn't know you had. So sometimes that's what, I've known people who are like, oh, I can't quit smoking now. It's like that. There's something about that. Even though it's like, yeah, you probably should quit smoking anyway, but it provides something that the body needs is sort of the tricky spot about that. So with respiratory excess, this can show up the tendency to hyperventilate under stress. The body's just so used to breathing that you kind of get stuck in that loop. So stress causes that pretty quickly. Active and excessive respiration, moderate cardiopulmonary excitation that can be associated with thyroid stress. So again, that hyperventilation, your heart rate just jumps up, you start breathing really fast. There's something, and again, we're going back to like patterns, right? They're going to keep talking about patterns in the body that use defines form. If you're using this if this is your type of stress response, I said earlier, I'm a freezer. That's my sympathetic response that I've identified within myself. If you are a fighter, then maybe your response is to heart rate jumps, you start breathing heavy, and that gives you a sense of aliveness, because it does. I mean, more heart, more breath, more life. So identifying that pattern could show you, yes, I do have a respiratory excess because I am using it in that way. And whether it's conscious or unconscious, it doesn't really matter, because it's happening in the body and the systems are one. So if deficient to stimulate, you may induce an increase in cardiopulmonary function. So these can be things to actually help increase heart rate. Things like cayenne, warming things, counterbalance adrenaline stress by increasing parasympathetic function. Again, activating that parasympathetic, being able to notice how you're using your breath. Other herbs will increase secretions of mucus, activity of cilia, which are the fine little hairs in your respiratory tract, like in your nose, and others will increase secretions of mucus, activity of cilia, or excite lymph or movement in the lungs. So if we're saying that those mucous membranes in the lungs or the respiratory tract or anywhere up here are dry, you want to increase those mucous membranes so that movement can occur, because what's happening is there's a lack of movement because of the dryness and tension, and secreting moisture on those surfaces will be enough to cause movement. You might not think that adding moisture to the situation is the answer, but like that, what cascade of events will that moisture then cause in that body system?
I was gonna say, it sounds like stress is like the root cause of everything.
Maya, that's funny, because I was just thinking the same thing, and I was wondering if this conversation is going to lead to like talking about adrenal fatigue and stuff like that. Like, seriously, I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah. I have a little thing about adrenal fatigue, which I definitely stole from Jim McDonald. But I remember when he first went on his adrenal fatigue tirade, I was like, yes, preach. Because like, what is adrenal fatigue? You know, it's your body reacting to the things you're putting it through. So maybe it's not the adrenals, maybe it's everything else. Okay, yeah, it probably will. Let's
And if it doesn't, we can go back to it.
Yeah, we'll get there. It is. So respiratory excess, if you need to cool it down, he says it's usually not an important consideration, which I'm like, yeah, maybe not. Cooling liver or mucous membrane functions or lessening that cardiovascular excess will take care of the limited secondary effects of respiratory heat. So again, the connection, and he doesn't see this as a constitutional issue either, because it is about like, you know, why are you breathing so heavy? Why do you always breathe so heavy? And why does the heart rate spike up? And then you go into questions of like, could mindfulness basically address this issue? And that's, I think, why it's not a constitutional thing as much as it is an acute thing.
We rarely have to cool someone's lungs. We normally have to heat them. So that's more often the action that we're looking for. If you want examples of all of these, just look at my hyperthyroid self. My thyroid is overreacting. So every system within me is told to overreact.
Yeah. He says here, this last bullet is, if it's related to thyroid stress, deal with it in that context.
Right.
Because like in Kayla's example, if we were to like look at Kayla as just lungs and address just the lungs, we would be causing more problems. And that's the idea of organ system energetics, is we're looking at the system as a system, because it's a complex system, but it's still a system within a system. And like the push and pull of those systems is it goes back to the one unit of the body, and like how we react to stress, how we breathe, how we digest, how we excrete. Ooh, cardiovascular deficiency. Okay. To speed up metabolism to an organ or tissue, more arterial blood is pumped in. To slow metabolism, blood supply is shunted away. That can cause deficiency. So more blood equals more life force, less blood equals less life force. So cardiovascular deficiency can cause cold hands and feet. There's not enough blood moving. So your extremities aren't getting the blood that they need because your core cardiovascular system, the pumper in the middle of it all, isn't getting the blood out to the external places where, I mean, like all the tips of your fingers have all these tiny capillaries, and poor blood flow just means it's not getting there. So that can cause cold hands and feet. That can cause dry skin and mucosa because you're like exactly the blood isn't getting there, so that the things aren't getting to where they need to go. A shallow pulse that is easily compressed. So that can look like, I'm thinking of sleep apnea for some reason, and I don't know if it would necessarily be a cardiovascular deficiency thing, but a pulse that slows down to the point that it sort of stops and then it jumps, right? Like we were talking about, like, oh, the excess has to pull back into a deficiency at some point, and then, go back and forth between those two things. A pulse that's so slow it can sort of stop and then jump start. Be cardiovascular deficiency. The skin flushes and blanches, like really changes colors under environmental or emotional stress. And it's, as a symptom, like I wouldn't say that's cardiovascular deficiency, but because I'm just generally I'm too yin of a person sometimes, and so maybe I'm like identifying overly with all these deficiency things, but I think that can also just happen because of environmental and emotional stress too. Like that's my point there, is that sometimes that just happens. General tendency toward peripheral vasoconstriction. That's just what I said about the cold hands and feet. Like the peripheral parts of the body are sort of shut down. And that's one way to think about it, is they're just sort of shut down. And what happens when the limbs sort of shut down is that your senses in your limbs sort of shut down. And so you actually become like less feeling in the world, I think, because like so much becomes, your life force is too inward that without it coming outward in the body becomes like the body and the self become inward, if that makes any sense. Which then, like we said, cascades into other issues. Cardiovascular excess would look like warm skin, a bounding pulse. You ever meet those people where you can like see their pulse in their neck, like as they're talking, or like in their chest? Strong and easy secretions and excretions. Usually concurrent with varying degrees of essential hypertension. So again, that's the hypertension related to stress and not a different disease state, with excess blood and interstitial fluid. So just lots of fluids, lots of blood movement. Blood viscosity may be high, either due to increased transport fats from liver and lymph or high blood proteins. So just like a thicker blood because it's trying to pump too much at once. So simply lowering the blood pressure in this case without decreasing blood volume or viscosity is to suppress the effect without altering the cause. So like we were saying, you look at this issue and you're like, oh, we need to lower blood pressure. Blood pressure is high because the blood is thick, because of hypertension and all the things that could be related to cardiovascular excess. So let's lower the blood pressure, but not address why it's thick or why it's high. Again, could cause more issues, like we were saying. So in that case, working on cooling the liver and kidney would be the root or the thing to start with that might alter. And by cooling the liver and kidney, or maybe just starting with the liver, by cooling the liver, you're going to cool the blood. And at that point, why worry about the cardiovascular excess? Because the liver is probably in excess too. So to stimulate the cardiovascular, if it's deficient, so increase the force and efficiency of cardiac output. That's not necessarily herbal related. It doesn't have to be. It can be diet related. It can be emotional work. It can be, it can be, like I said, cayenne, like warming things that actually do kind of get the blood moving. That's an option. Increasing the resistance of arterial walls, actually focusing on the strength of the vessels themselves. Stimulate parasympathetic energy. Oh, more parasympathetic action. And then herbs that act as vasodilators. So if you really do want to focus on just bringing more blood to the cardiovascular system, focusing on vasodilation and opening the blood vessels so that just simply more blood can move, that is smart. To cool, though, supporting the parasympathetic or cholinergic, I can never say that, but that choleric energy, that choleric fiery people. Yeah, we haven't talked too much about doshas, but like that choleric vata, like pitta. Yeah, Kayla's going, yeah, very choleric, like kind of jumpy like that, like we were saying with the excess heart, like too much at once. That's kind of like the bursts that come up. Supporting the parasympathetic nervous system, things that can just bring that rest and digest state to you. Sedating the heart and major arteries. There are just general things to sedate the heart. I'm thinking of violets. I mean, even though violets aren't specifically cardiovascular related, to kind of bring the heart into a centered, sedated state sometimes when it's just overwhelmed is a good option. And herbs that act as sodium leaching diuretics to pull sodium out of the body, which could be what's causing the high heart rate.
Also, motherwort, Sarah.
You said what? Motherwort?
Motherwort.
Motherwort. Yeah.
Fire.
Mm-hmm.
Makes you softer.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're in the final like systems, so I'm just gonna keep going.
Can I
Good
ask a
job,
question
everyone. Yeah, for sure, definitely.
about cardiovascular before we move on?
Yes.
So when you're talking about like thick blood, is that outside of seasonal changes? Because like Kayla said yes. So because like wintertime, our blood is thick. My grandmother always used to say, you know, when it was like, 70 degrees in March, we'd be burning up hot because our blood hadn't thinned back out yet for the summer. And then
that actually has to do, John Kinney, with where your capillary bed resides within your skin. So what we do is in wintertime, we pull our capillary bed tighter towards our muscles so that our outer skin, we have a buffer between our outer skin. And so it keeps us warmer. In the summertime, like right now, our capillary beds are really high and close to the top of our skin. If you notice, when you cut yourself sometimes in the winter, it's hard to get it to bleed. But when you cut yourself in the summer, you bleed all over the place. So it isn't about the viscosity of your blood so much as it is the relationship with the capillary bed. When we talk about blood in respect to being thick blood, we're usually talking about cholesterol, triglycerides, and overall fat content.
I also think of a hydration, like there's just in the wintertime, I'm not drinking as much water generally because, and I think there's just like a slowness and like my body wants to hold on to the moisture instead of expelling it. And I think that can alter also like the viscosity.
It makes a difference in the viscosity of your blood. If you're going in to get your annual blood test taken, you should have spent the day before doing nothing but pushing water, because otherwise, most usually people will come back dehydrated. Their tests will show that they're dehydrated. So that was a secret of always making sure the blood goes into the vial when they take your blood, is just drink enough water. As Sarah was saying, there's a water balance issue here, to thin things out a little bit and not have such a high viscosity.
Yeah. Great.
Did we answer your question, John Kenny?
Tremendously. Thank you.
So lymph and immune deficiency. So lymph and immune, this is another one that Michael Moore doesn't think that like the excess has much constitutional importance, but when you think about the deficiency, it's like, well, there's a lot of reasons it could be deficient too. And I don't want to just say stress because obviously there's so much more to it than that, but stress. So deficiency here can be associated with chronic or moderate immunodeficiency and slow recuperation. You ever had a cold or know someone who's had a cold and for like 6 months and then it comes and then it goes and then you kind of keep your little cough and then that kind of bleeds into a different symptom and then that kind of kickstarts the whole thing again and then it's a little bit different. So you think it's gone away, but it really hasn't. That's immunodeficiency. That's just like not having enough of an immune fighting power, enough of a fortified immune system to take care of the issue at hand. So it actually stays not dormant, but just at a lower degree in the body. This can also be slow healing of injuries or bruises, frequent low-level infections and high-stress tissues, such as respiratory and skin. Like when and like the cough thing, like having that respiratory sinusy stuff, things that you use you always use most of your organ system all the time, obviously, but your respiratory and your skin never rest the way parts of your digestive system do, if that makes sense. So like these frequent low-level infections can happen in parts of the body that are just exhausted because they're always working and your body doesn't have what it takes to fight it off. So it kind of goes to the weakest and most stressed out area. Cold and flu systems that come and go for a month or more, like I said, 6 months. I mean, some people, it's different for everybody. So functional causes can be constant subtle infections. So this drains immunologic energy, such as slow viruses, candida, so the yeast overgrowth, and sinus infections. These are ones that stick with you for a long amount of time. And if you have reoccurring things in this area, it could be the deficiency in the immune system or in the lymph flow. Diet poor in protein, emotional stress that induces depression or frustration, and persistent allergies that induce hypersensitivities and other agents. So emotional stress that induces depression or frustration, when you're just on the verge always of the breakdown because you're not processing it, it's just always there. I mean, think about the symptoms that I'm describing with the immune deficiency. It's just the thing that never goes away. And so if you're always on the edge, that can be, that's kind of related to go into sort of the metaphysical aspect of like, we are one thing. And so that low key emotional stress that kind of induces either the depression or the frustration, or either way, it's just that thing that never goes away, right? And then allergies, that thing that never goes away, bleeds into other allergies. So if you have one allergy that you struggle with and that kind of, you slowly just gain allergies. I mean, this happened to me, it's happened to people I know. One allergy turns into 2, which turns into 5, which turns into 10, which turns into your immune system is always reacting because it doesn't have, you're not processing your allergies in a way that you're not processing one at a time. It just becomes overwhelming. So and then, like I said, he says that the immune lymph excess seems to have little constitutional importance, or perhaps I just don't know. I thought that was so, it's like, perhaps I just don't know, but I think this is because when we get sick, we have to calm down our nervous system. People get sick. It's part of what we do. Humans, we have bodies that sometimes get sick, and we need to ramp up the immune system in order for that sickness to go away. So herbs to stimulate, if you have a deficiency, in order to stimulate the lymph and immune system, increase efficiency of lymph transport. So if you have sluggish lymph, I mean, I think about cleavers, you kind of get that lymph moving. Sometimes that takes care of the infection because you just start moving your lymph a little bit better. Increase efficiency of bone marrow proliferation by white blood cells. This is how your white blood cells are created in your bone marrow, and they're stored there too. And so having healthy bones and like healthy bone marrow, which might not have anything to do with the way you would think about treating the immune system, could actually end up helping stimulate the immune system. And
echinacea proliferates white blood cells.
That makes sense. And increasing efficiency of phagocytosis by innate immunity granulocytes. I am not, so your innate immunity is the immunity that is given to you. It's your adaptive immunity is the one, like as you come in contact with pathogens throughout your life, your immune system adapts, but your innate immunity is the one that's given to you. So if you need phagocytosis is the breakdown. Yeah, I guess I don't want to go into that because I don't entirely know how to explain it. But increase efficiency of phagocytosis because you need to simulate. Yeah, I'm just going to pass that bullet because I wish I had gone over that part before I read this, and I wrote this like months ago, and I don't know how I want to explain that. Next bullet, increasing efficiency. I guess I'm just thinking like your adaptive immunity might not be covering it. So maybe I'm saying that your innate immunity needs some help. I don't know. Increased efficiency of synthesis of, yeah, Kayla.
You want me to answer?
Yeah, go for it. My brain's a little like, oh, we're almost 2 hours in.
Well, no, it's okay. And this is something that has probably taken me all the years of teaching A&P to really understand what's being said here. So, so we continue to make stem cells throughout our life. We just don't make the concentration of stem cells that were in our fetal tissue. So, so we're still creating stem cells. So we're still relying on that innate immunity. So these granulocytes are actually made on the back part of your belly button and absorbed into the bloodstream to help aid with the use of continued innate immunity. So you're still, your immune system is still relying on that essential set that you were given at birth. So if we can stimulate those stem cells to be more proliferant so that more granulocytes go into the bloodstream, then we are increasing not our adapted immunity, but again, that innate immunity that we were born with. So it has to do with stem cell proliferation.
Great. Thank you.
Did that make sense to you?
Yeah, I don't know much about stem cell proliferation, but I think that was well said. And thank you for chiming in. Also to help stimulate in a deficiency situation, increasing synthesis of blood immunoglobulins, and which is, I mean, we're more talking about like, well, that's increasing blood flow, but also the immune cells that are going to be processed by the blood. And then some tonics stimulate liver breakdown of immune waste products as well. So that goes back to relating to liver health and making sure that your liver has the proper processing and stimulation as well.
So your immunoglobulins are affected by your T cell. So that when you are creating more immunoglobulins or complement proteins, some of that is happening in the liver and some of it is happening in the thymus.
God, the liver takes care of so much. I really do like stick with this idea that like the liver, like a lot of these deficiencies should come back to at least starting with the liver. And last note here, most allergies have acquired immunity underpinning. So part of the, if the chemicals produced by the antibody response are not removed from the blood in an orderly fashion by the liver, they induce further unneeded innate immunity reactions. So this is saying, again, like with the allergies causing more allergies, this is an acquired process. So if you have a reaction to one allergy and that is causing these chemicals produced by the antibody response, if that response isn't processed well enough by the liver, that will cause further issues and further immune reactions. So that's that's kind of how that works. And I've seen it happen, you know, like it's body's crazy. So skin and mucosa deficiency. So this is interesting. Often caused by liver deficiency, because usually when the liver is overloaded, where does it dump its next biggest problem? Onto the skin. Together with liver symptoms, vasodilation and secretory, the secretions, stimulation is often inadequate. So this causes dryness, eczema, dry flaky skin with cracks and fissures or rough spots. You lose this, like here, this picture, you lose the shininess. With dry skin, you have like more of a matte, like scratchiness that loses its moisture. And part of that shiny sebaceous glands is because, I mean, that's a protective, that's actually related to your immune response, like having that that layer there to help like keep bacteria and things from coming in contact with you and having that reaction is part of the immune too. So frequent mouth, rectal, vaginal sores or inflammation, these are that the mucosa there in your mouth and your anus and your vagina and all those like squishy, really tender like mucosa, when those are dry, they react more. When I was saying like sometimes dryness can cause tension, which can cause friction, that's kind of the cascade of events that happens with the deficiency in this system. And so excess looks like greasy, oily skin, often with adolescent type acne. That's like the surface level acne, like pimples, blackheads, just kind of never go away. Swelling or rash. This keratosis pilaris is that like small rashy bumpy patches that happen sometimes. And sometimes like this excess can happen in some acute ways. I've actually, when I looked that up, I was like, oh, I've had that before. Like just this weird little like rashy, itchy, like pimply thing that's not really, it's not connected to anything, it seems like, on often used membranes. So like your arms or something that you're always kind of coming in contact with. You have a tendency for ingrown hairs, sebaceous cysts, excessive sweating. All the skin is oily, not just the face, and all the skin is moist, not just during stress. And just reading that, I'm like, oh, right, like stress makes the skin moist. And so just as for me, maybe that was just like, oh yeah, as a symptom, like I need to notice the moisture in my hands as a stress response, you know, not for everybody, but for me, I was like, oh yeah, that's what's happening. These people have a warm, radiant heat and strong body scent. I think of kaphas, like going back to doshas, the kapha energy. Mosquitoes love them and they do well over winter. I'm like, yep, that's me. I have a lot of kapha energy and mosquitoes do love me. I do have like a radiant heat that seems to do well over winter, but I don't know, it changes. I mean, like I was saying, these things can come and go and it's not like I'm just one thing. So in order to stimulate, if there's a deficiency in the mucosa, You need to generally increase blood supply, more blood, more life force, simulates that cholinergic, I don't know. It's the choleric type, sympathetic and parasympathetic innervation. Yeah, so basically increasing that fire, increasing the nervous system response. You need to support the liver and better related functions to make better quality proteins and fats for cell regeneration. So this is stimulating blood constituents for rebuilding, blood availability for the tissues, and excretions from the skin. And to cool down the skin if there's an excess, they're either sedative to skin nerves or decrease liver excitability, because like I was saying, this definitely linked with liver function. And so if there's liver excitability that's causing this overflow onto the skin, you need to decrease the liver excitability, right? Start with the root. Skin mucosa excess is usually dependent on reproductive liver and kidney excess, and it's hard to affect directly, but that's what we were saying, is it's generally it's related to something else. It's not like the skin is just its own organ with a mind of its own. It's typically, I mean, it's surface level, right? It's surface level of the system that holds it, or that it holds, rather. It holds the whole system. Okay, last system. Whoop, whoop, whoop. This is the musculoskeletal, I think it's last system. This is my favorite, actually. I love the musculoskeletal system. And the deficiency in this region can look like, it's subtle, but it's so, except for joint aches and sense of weakness in the shoulders or legs. This is really interesting to me. Very pronounced lethargy after eating. So your body it's meant to move. I thought it was this. No, look, Kayla, I thought you had sent us like a video about Gil Headley. Maybe I know Jim did as well, but I think we had talked about like the fascia with his take on it, and he talks about like the feathering. The fascia is the thing that connects everything in the body. So like everything touches the fascia, and the fascia is not the muscles and it's not the skeleton. It's the thing that holds them together. And it's the thing that holds all your organs in place or doesn't. It allows them to move or not move. It can, and it freezes up after a very small amount of time. So in the morning, when you wake up from sleeping, it feels good to stretch, right? It's because overnight your fascia slowly started to harden and stiffen. And so without this like intense movement, you do lose mobility, because, and not that that's bad or good, or, you know, everyone has different ranges of motion. But the point that I'm saying is that our bodies are made to move. And so when we don't have the muscular skeletal energy, so if you're deficient here and you eat, your body is taking that, and this is how I see it. This might not be accurate at all, but this is how I understand that when you eat, your body is taking that energy into your joints and your muscles and this part of your body, and that can cause the lethargy, because your body needs more energy in that region, and it's not using in your digestive system. It's kind of taking your energy directly into your muscles. That's how I see it. So except for joint aches, you have the joint aches and a sense of weakness in your joint junctions, which are your shoulders and your hips. So these are the two parts of your body that hold and like rotate the rest of the movement in your body. So this is found in adrenocortical stress, which is the stress that a lot of people are running on, or thyroid stress. Seldom found in adrenaline stress, because that fight or flight is so short that it's like the longer term stress that can kind of cause this deficiency. Those with liver and GI excess usually show deficiency in musculoskeletal. So musculoskeletal excess will usually have deficiencies in liver, kidney, and reproductive. I might come back to that. And much chronic and muscle pain seem to have little constitutional implication, and that should be treated separately. Yeah, because there could be different reasons for that.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between adrenocortical stress and adrenaline stress?
Adrenaline stress. Mm-hmm.
Oh, because isn't your adrenal gland down by your kidneys? I can't remember.
It's on top of your kidneys.
Okay.
I am going to point you toward the handout that Michael wrote, because he does a really good job of breaking down the types of stress. Like there's a whole section that's stress patterns and what each one looks like. But I see adrenaline stress is like that thing that most people stay in, like that fight or flight, and then adrenocortical is more of like that chronic, like low-key stress. Kayla, do you feel that way?
Yeah, well, it's the cortisol buildup. When you have adrenaline stress, when you're constantly in adrenaline stress, you are in fight or flight all the time. And that can spill over to adrenocortical stress, but that's more of a more hidden kind of stress in the body. The outward adrenaline stress, everybody can see that going on. But this intracortical stress is when so many of our body systems are under stress that it is fatiguing the entire system.
So like adrenaline stress, constant state of fight or flight, that'd be like what we see in people post-trauma with PTSD. And then the adrenocortical stress is more just like that everyday life type stress.
Real underlying stuff. Like sometime with adrenocortical stress, it's the vibe. You know how one day you'll just feel really on edge because the vibe is really on edge and everybody is kind of hypersensitive those days. That's really that adrenocortical stress where you can't really identify anything in your life that's creating it, but it's upon you. You know, we watch the news, we get that kind of stress.
Yeah, I was thinking of it as like adrenaline is like, oh, I got to get to my 4 jobs and my 8 things, and then I got to take care of everyone, and adrenocortical is like the I'm always worrying about my bills.
Yeah. Yeah, that underlying stuff.
I'm always thinking about my email inbox. Yeah.
Yeah. No shit.
Yeah.
And this is probably a good time to talk about adrenal stress versus adrenal fatigue. You know, and this is a thing that got pointed out to us, especially those of us that were studying in the mid and the late 90s. There was a lot of discussion coming in from the Chinese practitioners about adrenal, you know, that we're just burning out our adrenals, that adrenal fatigue is real and our adrenals are just way too overstimulated. And what we have learned in subsequent years is it's the entire system that's having a problem. It's not just the adrenals. It's all of our body systems have this response to stress. And as Maya said, oh, it just sounds like everything's created by stress. Well, it is. Our bodies are built to respond to stressors. And if we don't have stressors, then we reach homeostasis and we die. So we need these stressors. They're not all bad. our response to them would denote if they are good or bad. If they cause us to hold our breath and get stomach aches, then we're going to consider those bad. All right. So in other words, it's what are our coping mechanisms? And those could be emotional, they could be physical, they could be mental, they could be spiritual, they could be in your food, they can be in what you drink every day. Those are the things that help us control the overall stress, because stress doesn't go away.
Right. Yeah. Like I think like rhodiola isn't going to keep you from thinking about your emails. You know, like maybe it's the practice of like, how about you stop thinking about your emails? And maybe it's more of a conscious choice than we realize. And like going back to the rant that I read at the beginning, like we like that edge. We like it. It keeps us alive. It is a sense of aliveness, like the central nervous system activation, these stress responses. We need them because we are them, because that's how we identify what's important and what's not important in life. But you know, the pattern, like, does this serve me? What?
Right.
Yeah, sound like we just gotta learn how to like balance it, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
not too much of something, not too less of it, because you know that's basically what stress is. Too much of something.
Right.
Yeah, we're always seeking that balance. We're always looking for it.
And that's nature too. That's the homeostasis. That's the ride, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely, that's the ride. So, and we need some of these stressors, again, or our body doesn't work, but we also need to know what to do with them. So Sarah, your example of rhodiola was great. So if you go, oh, gee, I really need to work with an adaptogen because stress is really eating on me here. So I think I'm going to have a cup of rhodiola tea. Well, maybe then drinking that when you're doing your emails is not the ideal situation. Maybe it's sitting mindfully and drinking that rhodiola and letting it soothe you and calm your feathers. I do that with green tea. I will make a cup of green tea and I don't do anything else. All right. There's no music playing. There's no television. There's nothing else going on. I am drinking my green tea and I am seeing all of those catechins in that green tea going in and soothing my nervous system and calming down my heartbeat and giving me the antioxidants my body needs to repair itself. So it's about mindfulness.
And it's funny that you say green tea as a way to calm, because normally when people like green tea is one of those super popular plants that the world knows about for energy and weight loss and like go. It's kind of abused in that way. And but really it can be a stress relief in the proper regimen.
It gives you energy because while you're drinking it, you calm down. Okay. And then after you've calmed down, you go, well, I can take on the world. Of course I can.
And provides you the antioxidants to add that actually adjust the free radicals that are causing you the stress in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I still think a cup a day, but no one should all do the same thing. Everyone in the world doesn't need to drink a cup of green tea a day. I do.
Or concentrated green tea. I mean, holy hell, it's like extracts of all the extracts and the strongest of the strong. Like,
I get beautiful tea leaves and make a tea. And then I use them the next day and the next day again. So if you really want to get the most out of your money, drinking some of these whole leaf teas can certainly help.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Shall we finish the muscular system?
I suppose.
So excess, and I just love that this is where we're ending. Muscular skeletal excess can look like tight muscles and tendons in the neck and the back and the legs or anywhere. Skeletal muscles are overstimulated when used and hypertonic and taut at rest. I heard this beautiful quote yesterday, actually, or maybe it was the day before. There's no such thing as a tight muscle and a calm nervous system. And like we were just saying, the nervous system doesn't need to be calm all the time. It's not meant to be calm all the time, but your muscles aren't meant to be tight all the time either. And so chronic tension is a sign of excess use in this system. So this person often needs massages and hot tubs and body work. And God, I mean, everyone needs those things, right? I just think like we all need those things. So most pronounced excess is in the muscles most associated by adrenaline: neck, shoulders, intercostals, the muscles between your lungs, the tense breathing, hyperventilating, or lack of breathing. Your lower back, your sacrum is your emotional storehouse of the body. If there's a lot of tension there, like right above your hip junction or in your hip junction, there's could be a disconnection between the upper and lower half of the body. We were saying that the womb is like this sacred, I don't want to say sacred, but it is sacred to me, like the seed that separates the upper and lower half of the body. If there's tension and issues there, I think about it as like just like a not always disconnection, but desire for reconnection between the upper and lower half of the body. So that might be related to tension in the legs, and there might be lack of tension in one part of the body and over tension in another part of the body. Other muscle excesses are caused by emotional guarding. So we keep kind of dipping into the metaphysical emotional aspect of all of this because we are one being and we are talking about constitutional organ system energetics. So I will say, emotional guarding. The brain and spinal cord defend or overstimulate muscles or parts of the body that are quote unquote dangerous. So your abdomen, hypertonic, overtoned, overtense in your abdomen is guarding reproductive organs. The arm and shoulder hypertonicity is guarding the head or the chest, your heart and your head. That's the joint junction that I talked about up here, is guarding the things up here. Upper back, it's protective and guards from a protective or submissive slump. That was one I identified in myself. I slump, and I have for years and decades, and identifying that is like, oh, that if I focus on releasing tension there, suddenly my shoulders fall instead of tense, and suddenly I roll back in a more natural way than needing that feeling to protect. And so this aspect is hard to treat with herbs if your body has actually morphed into a new way because of this hyper tension in specific parts of the muscular and skeletal systems. If there's specific parts of the body, because we can be loose in parts and we can be tense in parts. We can hold fluid in one part of the body and be dry in another part of the body. We are one, but we are parts. And that's why I like to break this idea of energetics down into systems or parts, because if you have kind of morphed your body into protection in this way, body work can help. Rolfing, he mentions rolfing or chiropractic. Rolfing does, I don't know too much about it, only that it physically forces the fascia into the place that it came from. And it's really painful and it's not for everyone, but neither is chiropractic. So body work is another topic.
Well, and rolfing unleashes a lot of emotional work that has to be dealt with. Mm-hmm. So if someone is wanting to go to a rolfer, you really should check some of their credentials. I have seen a rolfer throughout my life, and that said rolfer is also a therapist, so that when I hit those emotional places, there's someone there that can actually deal with it and help me through it and to the other side. Mm-hmm. I haven't done any rolfing for several years because I haven't really felt like I needed to break myself down in that way. Sometimes a good walk in heat will do that. It kind of melts everything.
Yeah.
And the fascia itself kind of melts. And it's a more gentle way of going about it. And if you're seeking a chiropractor, I think there are a lot of good chiropractors out there. I prefer chiropractors that do all manipulations with their hands and not with activators. And I know the reason they use activators is to try to save their thumb joints in being able to work on people for long periods of time and for many years. I see a chiropractor that uses my own body weight to adjust me. So he twists me and turns me in all kinds of directions and then lets me fall. And as my body releases, and I don't mean fall to the ground, but as my body releases, my own body will adjust itself. So be picky about your body workers.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good advice, because not everyone needs to be cracked open.
Yeah.
I think that's
Does Rolfing, like chiropractic work can be like it releases a lot of toxins, at least for me it does. Does Rolfing do the same thing?
You
You
bet.
feel-
So does massage. So
Yeah.
does a hot tub.
Okay.
Okay. Those all release metabolic toxins within us. It also releases emotional toxins within us. And when we feel that emotion, we create the chemical response in our body. So our body still has to deal with it over and over and over again until we no longer have response to that stimuli.
I was gonna ask, will yoga help too?
Yeah, yoga can help too. Sarah, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, I love yoga, and I love the specific yoga that I started learning in and training in was embodied yoga principles, like the idea of like the movements that we're doing with our body actually correlate to the way we are in life, or they can in the right context. And so yeah, like noticing, oh, I don't want to get too much in, but like noticing I feel this way when I open. I feel this way when I'm tall, and like all of that in the yoga practice, you're sensing your body, but the next layer is, what am I releasing or holding on to while I'm doing the yoga? And yeah, like there's so much emotional movement capacity when we do body work that we almost like forget that that's a huge part of what's going on anyway. Yeah.
Sarah, are you going to continue to post when the embodiment group is doing seminars and workshops?
Yeah, there's not anything for embodied yoga right now, but actually that we're getting ready to start like a new I'm the social media manager for them, and we're getting ready to start a new channel just for embodied yoga principles. So hopefully we're going to get more information out there
The
about.
reason I ask is because I think Maya would really be interested in that.
Cool.
It really falls into her area of knowledge, expertise, and hunger.
Cool. Yeah, I'd be glad to connect.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. And the last thing I was gonna say was just about like processing after body work is that the best, I mean, the massage therapists always tell me like drink a lot of water, or like take a salt bath. After like taking a salt bath, there's something about the movement and extraction, we're gonna pull things out of us and we're gonna flush it out of us. Because it doesn't make sense that that's only happening on like an anatomical level. I mean, we are our bodies, so we operate as bodies. So yeah, there's see, this is why this is my favorite this is why it's my favorite slide, or system to talk about, because like this is the movement, this is everything that connects it, and that this allows us to move through these things. So here's just some pictures of fascia.
I was going to say the good news is you got a body. The bad news is you got a body.
Right. Yeah.
We might as well live with our cup half full
Yeah.
and just be happy that we won the prize of a body.
Yeah. Oh, I come back to that so much, Kayla. The body is the gift.
It is. That's
won.
what excites me.
We won. We got it.
We won.
So
So
this-
when we come across chronic disease, that's a gift. The chronic disease is a gift to help us understand more about bodies and being physical and being in this realm where we can touch and feel and sense and smell and taste and hear and see, you know. More to come on that. You all will have that class soon enough.
Yay. So this is just what the fascia kind of looks like in like I said, it's not, the fascia is not the skeleton, it's not the muscular system, it's the thing that holds it together. So where things connect, and this like the sacrum, I said that was the emotional. Can you see my mouse moving on the screen right here? Yeah.
Yes.
So like I was saying, the sacrum is the emotional storehouse of the body, which is right here. And like it's so fascinating to me that like there's so much fascia there, because that's really a somewhat of an immovable part. And it like the body work here is really interesting. I store a lot of tension here, and I guess most people probably do. And because like it's really hard to move. Like it's not immovable, but it's a pretty firm structure in place. And that's just really interesting. And then there are different types of muscle, skeletal muscle, smooth muscle on the inside, that our organs are able to like, I even think like peristalsis goes through smooth muscle, that when your digestive system squeezing food through it, kind of like waves. There's something about this like beginning and ending and blending of the smooth muscle that allows that to happen. There's something about like the bandiness of the skeletal muscle that allows it to pull and grow. And then the cardiac muscle is it's really different type of, it's specific too, and really unique to the heart. There's like that vessaliness to it. And then the fascia is interwoven in all of it. And that's what gives us like strength and motion. That's how I kind of see it. So deficiency here would be sympathetic and motor nerve tonics. And again, like there's a list for these that were more about herbs, but if you're thinking not in just in terms of herbs, you're going to think about things that activate the sympathetic. So if you have a deficiency here, you're going to need to activate that fight or flight. You're going to need to like wake up, you know, so thinking about that as in terms of balance too. It's not like we were saying, we need these stressors. You need your muscular and skeletal system to move. Increasing blood flow to muscles and joints. Blood equals life flow. Blood, life flow. Life flow is blood. Blood is life. And it's often dealt with better by treating stronger imbalances first. So, yeah, usually something is causing this imbalance to happen, and you got to start somewhere else. And then to cool down, perhaps an overactive musculoskeletal system is to oppose the adrenal stress, disperse the blood to the viscera. These are your outer tissues, and act as simple muscle relaxers. So muscle relaxer, kava is actually one that comes to mind, is like it's an actual muscle relaxer, and some other things that would just give you like, yeah, herbs aren't body work. And like Michael Moore said, like when we just attack one thing, it's not the real thing, but it does help. And so sometimes even plants that just allow you that space to relax can show you what relaxing feels like enough that you realize what your next step is. So summary of organ system energetics. So in organ system constitutional evaluations, when we're talking about the constitution of the person, the herb needs to be tonic. So tonic is to tone the system. It is the small changes, it is the nourishment, it is the food. Think about, you know, it tonics in the world of herbs are like food in the realm of nourishment. Like there's many types of nourishment. Last class I talked about like movement as nourishment. It's something your body needs. The same way the calories are something your body needs. And the slow changes happens with tonics, which is something, and the idea of that's something that you need every day. If the herb or formula causes distress in the system, it is wrong. Unless there's a clear healing crisis in the primary concern, which Kayla could talk to you about healing crises, that sometimes we do need that explosive, like, oh, it gets worse before it gets better, but that's not necessarily true. So if in these terms, if we're talking about an intervention and something gets worse, we're heading in the wrong direction. Worsening the symptom is the worsening of the disease in most cases.
And we talk about that more in homeopathy.
Perfect. Don't try to treat imbalances that are barely evident. If we're going to make small changes to the body, why try to make a big change to something that's small? This seems sort of obvious, but like I think we get somewhat fixated on like, oh, here's something that's wrong, I'm going to fix it. And that goes back to the mindset we talked at the beginning that like just isn't really necessary. It's more of a societal standard that we just don't need to apply to the way we view medicine and medicating medicine, the way we heal ourselves. Don't try an herb for everything. This concept of be a lazy herbalist is really appealing to me because there are so many ways to help the body, to help the self, to heal ourselves, to act in the form of medicine, to medicament yourself or someone else, that like herbs just don't need to be the go-to. Herbs are powerful medicine. That's why tonics are the things to start with, because this is something that you're gonna can use every day. It's a different class of herb. Like I said, it's more of the food, and the food is medicine. Let medicine be like food. And the best herbs help several systems at once. Those are tonics. That's food. Like so much of what we kept coming back to with excess or deficiency is nutrients. And like we talked about last time, like nutrients are so essential. And nutrients are going to help every system at once. Every system at once. Your body needs vitamins, minerals, water, movement, always. And those things will help everything at once.
The herbs you do every day are daily brew. That's why they're daily.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then herbs for specific things. And most likely for chronic issues and irritating issues. My nose runs all the time, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just speaking to this lazy herbalist thing because one of the things that will happen, some teachers will do this when they don't know their audience. They'll say, how many of you take herbs on a daily basis? And you're at an herbal conference, so everyone wants to raise their hand like they're being good herbalists. And I'll sit there with my hand not raised going, I don't do that many herbs. I take things for my sinuses when my sinuses are bothering me. I take things for digestion when my digestion is bothering me. And otherwise, I do tonics. I do green tea and nettles and oats and red clover.
And culinary herbalism.
Culinary herbalism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, herbs don't fix everything, and they don't fix diseases. They fix people.
And symptoms.
You know, becoming an herbalist is about your relationship to plants.
Mm-hmm.
You want to deepen your relationship to plants and trust them. Remember, most of those pharmaceuticals are still made from plant material. Be a lazy herbalist. Be like Sarah.
Most of that's just lazy, but yeah, I was gonna say something, but I forgot what it was. Oh, and then remember to differentiate between constitutional tendencies and disease pathologies. So like we were saying, like constitutionally, everyone's different. Everyone's different. Some people live with certain blood levels that's considered normal. And like I said about the recommended daily allowance of nutrients in the last class, like most of that's just bullshit. And like you are not a statistic in a book. You are awake to your homeostasis and your metabolism, and not the numbers that you think you have to be. So all this goes back to feeling and noticing the how you react to these balances, and learning about what being in balance in certain ways means. Yeah, the example that Michael Moore uses regarding this is like the tendency for some people to manifest muscular skeletal deficiency under stress is very trivial compared to the somewhat similar deficiencies manifested by a collagen disease. If you were to treat one as if it were the other, you would be making a mistake. And so you don't want to aggravate problems because you think you have to fix everything, is really I guess the final point that I want to leave you with. And then you see on this section of your bonus on the handout, I was like, oh, if I get to that, and I like earlier today, I was like, no, I'm not going to go into that. This is enough information for today. And you do have some extra slides on the fed and fasted state, which I think is fascinating, but it is like complicated and not super necessary. So
I think you did fabulous.
Thanks.
Yeah, didn't you really enjoy that?
Hey, Sarah, I wanted to ask.
Sarah.
Yes.
I love this stuff. Yeah, I liked it a lot.
I wanted to ask a question.
Hmm.
Can I get your email or number? I really need to talk to you about something.
Yes.
Whichever you prefer.
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I encourage you all to get in touch with each other. And Sarah is technically our assistant director of the school. She's had a busy life the last couple of years and hasn't been able to be as involved with this as she was prior to then. But I keep holding on to her. I won't let her go.
Thank you guys. Yeah, Caleb, we have, like, who knows what the future holds.
I know we have a destiny. We've always had a destiny.
Yeah, I'll leave and come back for the rest of my life. It's okay.
I'd come back for you, kid, no problem. You're certainly worth it. So so you see where things can go, and that was a great way using